Some connections seem to defy time, logic, and even conscious choice. Have you ever felt, even from afar, that someone still carries you within them? Even when they're with someone else, the signs, the dreams, the inexplicable sense of presence remain. There is something beyond the visible operating behind the scenes of destiny, something that insists on lingering no matter how loudly the world shouts otherwise. It isn't illusion or fantasy. It is a profound dynamic between souls that have not yet completed their shared journey. When the mind has already given up, but the heart still beats in tune with the other, it is the unconscious speaking, and it speaks the language of the eternal. If you feel that this invisible bond still lives on, leave a comment with the phrase, "I recognize the truth of my soul." According to Carl Jung, the unconscious not only stores repressed memories, but also acts as a living agent in constructing our psychic and even relational reality. When two people connect deeply, what occurs is not merely a conscious emotional bond, but a fusion of unconscious contents. This exchange activates powerful archetypes, especially the anima and animus, the internal feminine image in a man and the internal masculine image in a woman. These inner projections placed onto the other create an experience of connection that transcends reason and remains alive even after external separation. When someone is with another person but still feels you, it may mean those projected contents have not yet been integrated. The unresolved bond is, in fact, the mirror of an unfinished individuation journey. Psychic energy remains active because the lesson between the two still pulses in the unconscious. The shadow, all that is repressed or unacknowledged, also comes into play, manifesting as inexplicable longing, jealousy, dreams, or even synchronistic events between you, as if the universe refuses to allow a complete break. Jung believed that a person's psychic destiny is intrinsically tied to their capacity to integrate these projections and recognize in the other the reflection of themselves. Thus, the universe won't let go, because the collective unconscious, the symbolic field that unites all souls, keeps the bond alive until both parties understand the true meaning of that connection. It isn't a curse, but an invitation to transformation. Since ancient times, love has been described as a force that transcends the body, time, and even will itself. But it is in Jung's depth psychology that we find a revealing path to understand why certain bonds simply do not vanish, even when the other person is already with someone else. Jung teaches us that what we call love is often the intense expression of unconscious projections. In other words, parts of ourselves we have not recognized, our desires, ideals, fears, and wounds, are cast onto the other as if they bear the mission of completing what we lack. When we fall in love, we project onto that person what we long to see in them. The soul recognizes in the other a symbolic image beyond the concrete individual. This image may be an archetype, like the anima or animus, or aspects of the self that have not yet fully emerged into consciousness. That is why the strength of this bond can feel so overwhelming and all-consuming. We are not dealing only with the real person, but with an entire psychic universe manifested through them. When that relationship ends, it is not uncommon for the emotional bond to persist, even if daily life together has ceased. This happens because the projection has not been completely withdrawn, nor has the unconscious content been reintegrated into consciousness. The psyche remains actively connected to the inner image of the other, creating the sense that they still feel you, even in a new relationship. This does not necessarily mean that the love is mutual in the present, or that the other person is aware of this bond, but rather that an invisible thread connects you at a deeper level, and it is still in the process of resolution. From a Jungian perspective, projection serves an essential purpose to show us what we have yet to recognize in ourselves. What the other still feels may be an expression of aspects they have repressed or never integrated. When someone feels longing, thinks of you, or senses your presence even beside another, it is their unconscious attempting to resolve what was left open. And likewise, when you feel that presence, you are facing an inner call that still needs understanding. Confusion arises when we mistake this psychic connection for an inevitable destiny or a promise of reunion. Although the unconscious operates mysteriously, it always aims for wholeness, not for repeating unconscious patterns. This means that feeling the other's presence isn't an automatic sign that you belong together, but rather an invitation to examine more deeply what this bond represents within you. There is something to learn, something to see, something to heal. Love that does not dissolve, according to Jung, carries a symbolic content not yet elaborated. It may be the projection of an ideal that does not match reality, the reflection of one's own search for meaning, or a mirror of traumas and deficiencies that the soul tries to heal through the other. When the universe does not allow the bond to vanish, it is not an external force conspiring, but the unconscious working so that inner truth may emerge. Therefore, the persistence of this connection is, above all, a process of self-knowledge. The other is a messenger of forgotten parts of yourself, a mirror that can only be transcended when you look within with courage and honesty. It isn't about letting go or holding on, but about integrating. Once the projection is withdrawn and understood, love stops being a prison and becomes a bridge to inner freedom. When you sense someone even at a distance, you witness proof that true love often is not that which remains on the physical plane, but that which awakens the soul to its own completeness. At the core of Jungian psychology, the shadow represents everything excluded from consciousness, impulses, desires, traumas, and potentials repressed throughout life. It is the dark side of personality, not in a moral sense, but in that it is unconscious and, for that reason, powerful. When we become emotionally involved with someone, especially intensely, not only the light is shared, but the shadow also emerges. This is why many relationships stay active even after breaking up, because there are shadow contents that were projected, activated, and never reintegrated. When a separation occurs yet the other's psychic presence remains alive, be it through recurring thoughts, vivid dreams, unexpected sensations, or frequent synchronicities, we face a bond that is not merely emotional, but profoundly archetypal. The shadow that the other reflected in you, or that you deposited onto them, continues to act, demanding recognition. The bond persists not out of romantic attachment, but because something remains uncomprehended, something not yet accepted. And so long as this content remains unconscious, it will keep manifesting through the other's living memory. The most challenging aspect of this process is that the shadow often hides within idealizations. What we most admire, desire, or miss in someone frequently points to something we have yet to develop in ourselves. That is why the other's presence endures, because they continue carrying for our psyche the symbol of something lacking in us, whether strength, freedom, security, intensity, sensuality, or acceptance. And this symbol cannot simply be forgotten, for the soul does not work by forgetting but by integrating. On the other hand, the shadow also reveals itself in the most painful parts of a relationship: jealousy, dependency, abandonment, rejection. Often the psychic bond remains because the other, even unconsciously, revealed to us a wounded part of ourselves that has not yet been acknowledged. It is common that, after a breakup, one continues to feel anger, sadness, or attachment, not because of who the other is today, but because of what they activated within ourselves. An old trauma, a pattern of humiliation, an unfulfilled need for validation. These pains do not belong to the other, but to our own emotional history, which they merely awakened. Carl Jung said that what is not brought to consciousness returns as destiny. The person we still feel from afar may be the symbolic embodiment of a wound still governing our choices. And until that wound is brought to light, it will continue to guide silently our thoughts, dreams, and even our encounters. Thus, the shadow has the power to keep two souls connected, not through complete love, but through unfulfilled healing. This understanding radically changes how we view bonds that do not dissolve. Instead of trying to forget or insist on an illusory reconciliation, the invitation is different: to investigate what that person represents in your psyche. What part of you did they reveal? What pain did they expose? What potential did they awaken? Answering these questions begins to free the psychic energy trapped in that bond. As the shadow is brought into consciousness, it ceases to direct the soul's backstage. Then the connection with the other loses the weight of obsession, irrational longing, or painful attachment, and transforms into understanding and lightness. True love does not imprison, it reveals. And often what we feel as a love that won't pass is merely the most hidden part of ourselves trying to find its way home. Therefore, when a separation does not break the psychic bond, it signals that some aspect of the shadow still awaits recognition. And healing begins not with forgetting, but with the profound acknowledgement of what the other, intentionally or not, taught us about ourselves. One of the deepest concepts in Jung's psychology is that of the anima and animus, the archetypal images of the feminine and masculine residing within every human being. Jung believed that every man carries within his unconscious an inner feminine figure, anima, and every woman an inner masculine figure, animus. These images are not based on real people, but on symbolic representations formed by personal, collective, cultural, and psychic experiences. They act as bridges between the conscious and unconscious, and manifest intensely through love and desire. When we fall in love, often what happens is not simply meeting another person, but recognizing, projected onto them, our own anima or animus. This explains why certain bonds feel so magnetic, inevitable, and deeply familiar, as if we have always known that person even without ever having met. In truth, we are recognizing an inner aspect of ourselves reflected in the other. That is why even when the relationship ends and the other moves on with someone else, the sense of presence can persist. The other has become, symbolically, a vessel for an inner image. The bond remains because the anima or animus is still active, clamoring for integration. It is not merely longing for the real person, but for the psychic image they came to represent. And this image, being archetypal, carries a force that does not obey the rational laws of logic or time. In men, the anima often manifests as the idealized woman, sensitive, mysterious, inspiring, spiritual. In women, the animus often appears as the strong, protective, assertive, wise, or even rebellious man. When we project these images onto a partner, we feel they complete us, bringing forth something essential within us. But the true purpose of this projection is not to merge with the other, but to awaken what is dormant within ourselves. When he still feels you, even while with someone else, it may be because his anima image is still active in him. Perhaps he projected onto you something no one else could symbolize, a profound aspect of the feminine that resonates with his soul. And until he recognizes this internally, he will continue seeking that content outside, which keeps him psychically bound to you. Likewise, you may have projected your animus into that figure, who has moved on yet still inhabits your dreams, thoughts, and desires. This dynamic becomes especially complex when there is no awareness of the process. Projection becomes a prison when the person believes only the other can provide what they themselves have not integrated. Love turns into attachment, admiration into idealization, and connection into emotional dependence. Jung invites us to withdraw this projection and understand that the anima and animus are not the other. They are parts of ourselves that need conscious development. The universe does not let go because, indeed, that inner image has not yet been recognized for what it is. We continue to feel the other because, deep down, we continue to search for ourselves. The sense that he still feels you may also be tied to the fact that on some unconscious level, he senses there is unfinished content, something you symbolized that no one else has replaced, because replacement does not resolve the process. Only integration does. When we understand this mechanism, suffering begins to give way to clarity. We start to see that the love lived was a key to access hidden parts of ourselves. And no matter how intense the bond was, the other was first and foremost a messenger from our own unconscious. Their image may vanish from our lives, but what it awakened will remain ours, and that is the true treasure. Until we welcome that inner image, we remain stuck seeking outside. But when we recognize that the anima or animus lives within us, we begin to experience a silent freedom, the freedom to love without dependence, to let go without loss, to remember without pain. Because what the other revealed is now integrated into our soul. The journey of individuation, central to Jung's analytical psychology, is the process by which an individual becomes who they truly are, integrating conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, masculine and feminine. It is a profound, lengthy, and at times painful traversal toward the totality of being. And on this path, love, especially that which does not end, that remains even at a distance or in absence, plays an essential role. The so-called unfinished love is often not a mistake or an emotional accident, but an indispensable piece in the soul's architecture. When we feel that the bond with someone still pulses even after the breakup, we face a symbolic invitation to look deeper. The universe, far from being a romantic conspirator, acts as a mirror for the psyche. What has not been resolved, what still echoes in the soul, returns, not as punishment, but as an opportunity for growth. The love that could not complete itself on the concrete plane may have been destined to fulfill a higher function, pushing us toward our own essence. Individuation demands that we look at ourselves with radical honesty, and it is precisely in intense relationships that the most hidden parts of the soul come to light. A partner who left us but is still felt strongly may have revealed aspects that until then lay dormant. Our capacity for surrender, our limits, our childhood wounds, our creative potentials. This not ending is not a failure, it is an initiation. The other's absence forces us to turn inward, to what we projected, to what we need to heal and integrate. In many cases, the persistent feeling for someone who has gone another way reflects an unfinished task within ourselves. And that task rarely concerns reuniting with the other. It is rather the need to reclaim what was activated through the relationship, the power to love, the courage to be vulnerable, the clarity about our own patterns. Unfinished love is, in truth, a living metaphor for a soul that has not yet completed its learning cycle. And until that happens, the bond remains alive, not as an external destiny, but as an internal direction. From the Jungian viewpoint, wholeness is not achieved through a perfect relationship, but through integrating opposites within one's own being. The other, even absent, is the catalyst for this process. And the pain of absence, when accepted consciously, transforms into an impetus for transformation. That is why unfinished love has a purpose. It compels us to evolve. Nothing is more potent for self-knowledge than a love that cannot be lived as we wished, because it dismantles illusions, reveals our deficiencies, and at the same time points to what we must still achieve internally. Many people spend their lives trying to close these stories, believing the only solution is reunion, reconciliation, or forgetting. But individuation does not work with external goals. It operates on inner alchemy. What needs closing is not the contact with the other, but the cycle within oneself. And that cycle ends when we can look at the story and ask, what did this person teach me about myself? Which parts of me did they bring to the surface? Which wounds did they touch? And which potentials did they awaken? The soul does not measure chronological time, nor obey social conventions. What we feel may seem out of context but has deep roots in the unconscious, and the universe in turn merely responds to the inner movement. If the bond still persists, if dreams about that person continue, if psychic presence still pulses, it is a sign the work is not yet complete. It is not about waiting for someone, but about answering the call of your own soul. At the end of this journey, unfinished love transforms. It ceases to be absence and becomes symbol. It is no longer about the other. It is about you. It is about who you became through that pain, that memory, that connection. What was once absence becomes an inner presence. What was longing becomes wisdom, and what seemed an eternal void reveals itself as a portal to your true self. This is the destiny of love that does not end, not a return to the past, but the birth of the future within you. Some connections do not exist to last, but to transform. When we feel someone even at a distance, when the psychic presence of the other insists on remaining, the universe is not punishing us with memories, but offering a rare opportunity to look within and understand what still pulses, what is still missing, what needs integration. Relationships that remain active in the unconscious are those that touch essential parts of our soul, be they light or shadow, and therefore cannot be ignored. Carl Jung teaches us that the true path to emotional freedom is not forgetting but understanding. And when that understanding arrives, the soul finds peace. The other, then, ceases to be absence and becomes a mirror. Pain turns into clarity. The feeling that was once a prison transforms into liberation, because all that remains is what still needs healing, and every healing begins with recognition. If this content resonated with your journey, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Also, watch the video appearing on your screen now. It is the natural continuation of this dive. Go deeper. Your transformation begins with a single conscious step.